She blurted out on air she has Doria Ragland's criminal file.
Compassion for the father who actually brought her up, who paid for her private education while her mother was in jail, who took huge care of her. And she's not seen him in the latter years. More importantly, I mean, she's not just seen him, she's like totally snubbed him.
When was her mum in jail? When was her mum in jail?
Years ago. Do you want me to give you the precise date, time? Because I haven't got it.
I've never heard that forever.
Years ago. Anyway.
In any case, we must go back to a period of Meghan Markle's early life that is rarely discussed in order to comprehend what actually occurred to Doria. A moment that remains unaltered, inexplicable, and hidden behind quiet in her chronology like a blank page. Meghan's mother, Doria, appeared to disappear from her daily existence when she was still a little child. For years, not just a weekend or a few months. Teachers at Meghan's school recall that her father, Thomas Markle, was frequently present despite being exhausted from working long hours on set. They all had the same response when questioned about Doria. They never ever got to meet her. Similar experiences were recounted by neighbors on the same block. Meghan would be playing outside. Before dawn, they would witness Thomas heading out to work. However, Doria appeared to be both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She was a ghost in plain sight. The stated justification was straightforward. She either lived or worked across town. But even as a little child, the justification seemed flimsy. For what reason would a woman decide to raise her daughter almost alone while living far away? Why would she vanish right when a child most needs their mother? And why did she never come back with an explanation? The absence was not transitory, according to family members. It was complete. Meghan's upbringing was shadowed by those lost years, and no one dared to speak up. And the reason the tale you're hearing now exists at all is because of that silence. Because the secret that influenced all that came after is hidden inside that missing chapter. Something odd continued happening when researchers dug deeper into Doria's early adult life. They followed each route until it abruptly came to an end. Records associated with her name were found in public databases. However, many of them contradicted her official narrative. Addresses were wrong, dates were incorrect, and one set of documents included something far more disturbing. Criminal charges under a different version of her name that were connected to an address she had previously used were abruptly sealed. Not removed, not dropped, just sealed. Every time legal researchers tried to obtain copies, they received the same response. Access is not permitted. It was plainly recounted by a legal source who was familiar with vintage Los Angeles files. The files are there. Someone ensured that they were never exposed to daylight. These sealed documents correspond precisely to the years when Doria was not present in Meghan's life. Nobody in the Markle family will talk about those same years. These are the years when all timelines get hazy. Every response becomes ambiguous, and every detail vanishes behind deliberate, silent pauses. Whatever transpired during that time was significant enough that someone made sure the paper trail could not be traced. Investigators came up with the first significant explanation regarding her disappearance as a result of this concealment. People who moved about Los Angeles movie sets in the late 1980s claim that Doria's absence had nothing to do with job or distance. It has to do with surviving. According to some who were around at the time, she was entangled in a minor financial scandal. People who worked behind the scenes on different productions are part of the book's financial flow. Some even had ties to the same groups that Thomas Markle was employed by. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't big, but it was against the law. Silently, cash moved, favors were exchanged. Then something went wrong. According to sources, a number of the persons involved were able to avoid detection when the operation failed. Thomas maintained a spotless record, while Doria was left standing and held accountable for having the money at the wrong time. She didn't say anything, didn't say who else was involved or how far it went. Nobody really knows if it was a strategic choice, fear, or loyalty. It is evident that the consequences pushed her into a situation from which she was unable to freely escape. A location that separated her from her kid, her house, and the life she was attempting to establish. Her disappearance was a result rather than a sign of neglect. Years later, She was resolved to never let the truth surface, and she wore that quiet like armor when she returned. We must examine the hidden world beneath Los Angeles in the late 1980s and early 1990s in order to comprehend how much Doria's life may have deviated from the surface picture we see now. The city was glowing from the outside at this time. New dreams, movie sets, and bright lights. However, a different sort of network existed behind that radiance. A network of individuals who traveled covertly between the entertainment industry and the streets. People who were familiar with that time period claim that Doria wasn't unintentionally running into these circles. People familiar with the area at the time reported that she became caught up with currency handlers, criers, and runners who operated in the shadows. These individuals were vital to the underground economy that existed behind Hollywood's glossy exterior, but they worked in silence and were unseen by most. When banks were unable to assist, they transferred money. When no one else would, they carried drugs. Additionally, they need individuals who could easily fit in. On the exterior, they appeared normal and innocuous, yet when it mattered, they could move without being observed. Doria was the perfect person to blend in with that environment without drawing attention to herself, since she was young, intelligent, calm, self-assured, and lived a private life. According to sources, she may have performed double duty in her professional roles as a social worker and travel agent. They were respectable on paper. In reality, they could have provided her with the freedom and anonymity to simultaneously traverse both worlds. She used to be a regular woman leading a straightforward life. The next, she was supposedly negotiating a secret passage where compliance was necessary to survive and favors purchase silence. If this is accurate, her disappearance was not the product of a single misfortune. It was the outcome of the environment she entered, a world in which disappearing was perfectly normal. It was anticipated. The narrative, however, takes a dramatic turn at this point because, whereas some contend Doria was drawn into criminal networks, others maintain the contrary. Another group of sources claims that Doria's disappearance had nothing to do with evading the authorities. Working with it was the key. According to these reports, Doria started working for federal authorities as a confidential informant. She had access to individuals and information that agencies sorely needed, not by coincidence or coercion. The sealed documents were not proof of guilt in this version of events. They were proof of collaboration. Files that were kept private for her protection rather than to preserve a reputation. Her identity would have needed to be concealed, her address protected, and her movements restricted if she was helping law enforcement with investigations involving financial fraud, drug trafficking, or underground activities in the Los Angeles area. Her abrupt departure and complete absence throughout crucial years of Meghan's childhood are all explained by this idea. The timing discrepancies, the sealed documents, and the sudden transition from her former existence to her serene spiritual resurgence. According to sources, she could have lived peacefully throughout this time in protective custody under a different identity while more significant cases were going on around her. And she reappeared in the world with a whole new energy when it was finally safe. Calmer, quieter, nearly reborn. If this is accurate, Meghan was unaware as a child that her mother wasn't leaving her. It was protecting her from something far more perilous than distance. Doria didn't appear to have survived chaos when she eventually made a comeback to the public eye. She appeared to have buried it. She was composed, focused on yoga, healing, spirituality, and forgiveness, as though she had entered a completely new realm. According to many who knew her at the time, she had a calm demeanor that contrasted with the volatility she was said to have experienced. She hardly ever talked about the past. She stayed out of the old circles. She didn't get in touch with many of her old pals. She seemed to have made the decision to start again from scratch. However, such tranquility comes at a price. Beneath her peaceful manner and kind smiles, there was a lady who had deleted whole chapters of her life in order to endure what she had gone through. She wasn't only changing who she was removing herself from a past that she would never be able to revisit. In the end, the world got to know this new Doria. The kind granny leading a tranquil life in California, the calm mother at the royal wedding. Beneath that serene veneer, however, was the weight of all she wished would remain hidden forever and everything she was unable to express. A quiet understanding developed between Meghan and her mother as she got older, and her acting profession refined her public persona. Meghan made a conscious decision, according to those acquainted with their arrangement. Doria would shield Meghan from the truth in exchange for her shielding her from the outside world. The arrangement was straightforward yet effective in order to completely dodge the limelight. Meghan made sure her mother had stability, a secure house, a nice life, and financial security. Doria avoided controversy in return. No public remarks, no interviews, and no unexpected appearances. Despite her daughter's transition from Hollywood to monarchy, she continued to work behind the scenes. They both benefited from this agreement. It gave Meghan authority over her story. It kept history hidden where Doria needed it to remain. However, even the most solid agreements can break under the strain of time, and all secrets have some weight. Eventually, the walls separating them was the quiet that had once shielded their relationship. And it had nothing to do with crime, concealment, or lost years. Rather, it was the harshest reality that supposedly rocked Meghan to her core. It has to do with family. Sources familiar with Doria's early life claim that she had a romance that no one ever knew about long before Meghan was born. The result of that connection was a boy who was adopted out of state, given a different name, and reared by a different family. Doria never mentioned the child again. Beneath every stop, quiet, and gap in her narrative lay this secret. She was very faithful to the secret. At the expense of her own identity, she kept the secret. Meghan's life changed in a way that no one could have predicted when this reality became apparent. Because finding a brother you were unaware of changes not only your history, but also how you perceive yourself. No public appearance could conceal the rift that this revelation caused between Meghan and her mother, according to people close to the issue. It felt as though the confession itself had shattered something they were both attempting to keep together. As the lady who had previously stood next to her, silent and unflinching, suddenly appeared to be worlds away. One question persisted in silence behind the palace doors, the cameras, and the well-constructed narratives. What more has been concealed under the surface if this was the secret Doria kept for many years? The invisible reality looms between Meghan and her mother as the world watches her navigate her meticulously managed existence, polished, poised, and flawless. A reality too strong to be buried again and too weighty to be forgotten. And now that the flaws are fully visible, their narrative will never be the same.